Hey friends, I'm RSKT, and in today's video I'm going to be showing you how I went about making this piece of artwork using Procreate on the iPad Pro. A lot of the content that I've posted on this channel so far has solely revolved around using Affinity Designer. While I do use Affinity Designer for the majority of my artwork, it's not the only app that I use. I think it's really important to know how to use a variety of different apps, know their strengths and weaknesses, and also know how to make them work harmoniously together. So today's video is going to be using Procreate, but to all of those people that subscribe to my channel because they wanted more Affinity Designer content, don't worry, we will be coming back to Affinity Designer at some point. I do have a lot more content planned for that app. Before we get started, I just want to say a really quick thanks to everybody that has subscribed to this channel so far. We hit 250 subscribers this week, and I thought it was going to take me a lot longer to even get to that point. I'm absolutely stoked that everybody likes what I'm doing on this channel so far. I've seen a lot of people on Reddit and Facebook and Instagram reach out to me. They're showing me examples of their artwork that they created following my last tutorial where we made a tentacle. And if you haven't checked that out, please do. But yeah, from the bottom of my heart, I'm really stoked that everybody's here and everyone's coming along for the ride. So definitely stay tuned for more. And yeah, so let's get started on this design that I did in Procreate. So just like all my other drawings, I start off with a basic sketch. Usually when I'm doing a big composition, I like to block things out by shapes and get the general layout first. But this one, I didn't really have a plan in mind as I was going. I was sitting up in bed, I was just trying to switch off, and I just started throwing in details here and there until I sort of had a head that I liked the look of. And then I started blocking in the rest of the body. You might have noticed that you can't see the Procreate UI or anything like the layers on my screen, and that's because I was using Procreate's Time-lapse feature to record this one. I didn't actually record my screen as I went along. So although you can't see my layers, the layers breakdown is actually really simple. I've got a layer for all of this rough sketch, a layer for fine lining, a layer for fine line details, a layer for color, a layer for shadows, and a layer for highlights. And that's pretty much it as you go along. So here you can see me doing in some fine line work, and I'm actually putting a lot of the details in as I go. Usually I try and make the main outline a lot thicker than any of the other details, so that it's a lot less jarring on the viewer's eyes and the whole image is a lot easier to make out. But this time around, I just didn't really care. I didn't really have any plans on doing anything with this picture. I haven't gotten it printed on anything. I'm actually not really that stoked about it, but it was a fun experiment to try using Procreate to paint in the usual style that I do in Affinity Designer. I think Procreate's a fantastic app, but it's really only fantastic for Apple users. And if I'm being perfectly honest, I'm not an Apple user. I literally got an iPad Pro because I wanted to be able to use Affinity Designer and a few other music apps on the go that just weren't available on Android. I haven't used Procreate as much as other apps, although I do use it to draw up a lot of portraits. And speaking of, that's what's going to be the next few videos. So far, all the artwork that I've posted to this channel has revolved around these hideous looking monsters and creature designs, and they're definitely my favorite thing to draw. I can really switch off when I'm doing them. But I actually do a lot of other styles of artwork, and I do plan on showcasing some of that. So yeah, in the next couple of videos, I'm going to be uploading some portraiture work. Going back to the design, usually when I'm trying to do an artwork, I don't like using true black, or at least when I'm doing like a digital artwork. I find that true black can kind of clash with some of the colors that you put down later on and just feel like a lot more unnatural to work with and unnatural to look at. In this one though, yeah, I'm using true black, and it wasn't a conscious decision. In fact, it was probably more of a mistake. As I said, I wasn't really putting a lot of thought into this one. I was just sort of doodling in my spare time, seeing what I could come up with. Some of these pictures might look just like purposely weird and grotesque to people, but it's just the way that I've been drawing ever since I was a kid. I really like just putting down lots of folds and creases and elongated fingers and gnashing teeth and stuff. I don't know why, I just really like doing it. This one in particular kind of, I guess, had a little bit of a message behind it. And a lot of my other artwork does too. A lot of people might not know this, but I actually have Tourette's syndrome. And a few of my tics involve a lot of movement in my jaw, and it tends to get kind of painful. So much so that I've actually recently had Botox injections to help prevent me from doing it. So while I was waiting for that procedure to come around, I sat up in bed and I just drew this picture of a guy ripping his jaw off. It's just kind of how I felt at the time, even though it's a little weird to look back on now. But yeah, I don't know, I think it turned out kind of cool in a weird sort of way. Normally, when I'm doing a piece of artwork digitally, I tend to sort of skip drawing in shadows during the outline phase, and I just rather paint them in later. But in this one, I think originally I was just going to leave it black and white, and then I wound up colouring it anyway. So there are just more lines than usual. This is me trying to make the outline a little bit thicker of the main areas, like I do in a lot of my other pictures. But there was just something about it I didn't like, so I just went back to how it was before. As I said earlier, I know a lot of people subscribe to me, probably hoping that I was going to just be making Affinity Designer tutorials all the time. But I'm a firm believer that you should sort of spread yourself out across applications. I'm sure a lot of people remember being burnt by Adobe in the past when they got really used to it and suddenly couldn't afford a subscription without a full-time job, and then probably wound up having to go off and learn something like Affinity Designer. So being able to jump from program to program, finding each one's strengths and weaknesses and making them all work together is not only sort of good for personal and artistic growth, but it can really help you land a job a lot easier too. Cool, so now I'm in the coloring phase. Normally I'll make clipping masks for my colors in other programs, and I know that there is kind of a way to make clipping masks in Procreate as well, but I just couldn't be bothered trying to remember how to do it. So I just colored everything in, went outside the lines, and then came back in and erased it later on. I have to say, I quite like using Procreate. It's definitely got a very natural feel compared to a lot of other digital apps. There's definitely something really intuitive about it, and I think that the fact that anybody can just pick this app up and jump straight into it is a real testament to that, without having to learn some overly complicated UI or a bunch of other functionality that they're probably never going to use. So yeah, I mean, I highly recommend it. I think it's really awesome. I might not do the majority of my work in it, but you know, whatever suits your workflow is the one that you need to stick with, right? Now I'm just coming in and painting in some shadows. I've said in a lot of my previous videos that I really don't try to focus too much on a consistent light source when I'm doing these types of illustrations. Sometimes I might, depending on the sort of mood I'm going for, but a lot of the time, like this character, he's got like a lot of really raised bumps and folds and edges, and a lot of really recessed areas as well. So I kind of just go through the process of painting lighter shades of color onto edges that are sticking out, and then just painting in more shadows in the recessed areas. Kind of like a little ambient occlusion effect that you get when using a 3D application. I think it looks really cool, and it just makes images like this pop out in like such a vivid way. This definitely was like a little bit of a weirder painting method for me. Usually I'll just use like a bunch of like really grungy brushes and sort of layer different textures and whatnot up from there. But this time I just wanted to sort of try mixing paint on the surface and just sort of, you know, seeing how I could blend things together in like a bit of a smoother way, or a more traditional way, I guess. And yeah, I think it turned out kind of cool in the end. Just a quick recap as well. I know that you guys can't see my layers, but I'll just quickly go over my structuring of the layers again. There's only a few, very simple. We've got a sketch layer, a fine line layer, and I think maybe I even just bothered drawing in the details on that same layer as well. I hide the sketch layer. Underneath the fine line layer, I've just got a color layer, And all of these colors that you're seeing on screen at the moment are all done on that single layer. So if I go too bright on one area, I'll just undo it or paint back over it with a darker color. And then yeah, I've got a new layer on top, and that's acting as these shadows. And then eventually I have one more layer thrown in for good measure, just to put in a bunch of highlights. I like doing things this way because it sort of offers me a bit of a non-destructive workflow when I'm working. You know, if I spend a good hour painting in shadows and then sit back and think that it looks like crap, I don't really have to repaint anything. It's a lot easier for me to just remove parts of that layer and then start those areas from scratch. Cool, so now I'm just painting in these highlights. I really went overboard with these highlights too. Man, I just put a highlight on every edge I could find, and it's a little much. It's kind of like a very embossed effect, but it was a fun experiment all the same. Some people thought it looked really cool, and yeah, I don't know if I'm all that stoked on this image. But yeah, I've used a fairly off-white for all of my highlights, and yeah, just sort of come in underneath my line layer and painted a ton on top of my color layer. When you break down this whole process, it's actually very simple. I think like the hardest part of this is really just the drawing. Once you have like your basic outline down pat and you're happy with it, all the coloring is just, you know, switch off your brain and you know, think about something else while you just plow through the rest of your work. It's really relaxing and really soothing. I really like it. Puts me in a happy state. Sweet, so I did kind of cheat one little bit, and I brought the whole image into Affinity Photo and just threw on a couple of very tiny little adjustments using some adjustment layers. I know that you can do a lot of this in Procreate as well. I just kind of like the tools available to me and in Affinity Photo a little bit more for that sort of thing. So yeah, definitely stay tuned for the next couple of videos. They are going to be some portraits, or at least my attempts at portraits. I'll talk a lot more about that in the next one. And then hopefully after that, possibly a little tiny little Adobe Illustrator tutorial, although I'm sure a bunch of my subscribers are probably sworn off that app at this point, but it's a fairly old time-lapse. And I might even segue that into why I switched from Adobe Illustrator to Affinity Designer. And then hopefully this drawing course will be out. I'm really stoked to be launching something like this and sharing it with all of you. I've just got to get my ass into gear and actually finish it. So definitely stay tuned. Hit the like if you like. If you don't, tell me why, and please subscribe for more. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks.